Can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me now? See if you can hear me, let me know. Give me a thumbs up in the chat if you can hear me. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you guys hear me? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? Yes. All right. Awesome. Okay. We're ready to go. All right. Welcome, guys. Sorry about that. I apologize. Sometimes we have technical difficulties. Okay. So, welcome to our live weekly question and answer session where we go live every Thursday at 3 Eastern. And I answer all of your questions on CNA training and testing and workplace and whatever else you want to talk about. So when you come in, give me a hello in the chat. Go ahead and put your questions in there. If you're new, if you're just now joining us for the first time, I always give a little mini lesson at the beginning of this, and that gives you time to put your questions in the chat, and we'll get to those in just a little bit. But I usually have some sort of, so I usually have, sorry about this, some sort of a lesson that I give at the very beginning. And it will cover either a training concept or a testing concept or something relevant to the workplace. Today, actually, our topic covers all three, and it's a really, really important topic, so I'm going to devote just a little bit of time to it. So if you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes. But today, I want to talk to you about the chain of infection. Now, I said that this covers all three areas, training, testing, and workplace, and it really does. So training, you're going to learn, those of you who are in training, you're going to learn about the chain of infection, but I want to put this in a little bit more friendly terms because the way the textbooks address this, it's really kind of dry and it kind of leaves you with, okay, so what type feeling. Testing, you will have test questions on the chain of infection and specifically infection control. In fact, about a third of the test is going to touch on infection control in some way. So it's a huge topic on the state exam. But the workplace is really the part that we have to think about because this is where it gets real. It gets real for you and it gets real for the patients. So training makes it really kind of theoretical. Testing, it tests your knowledge, but the workplace is really where it counts. So I want to spend some time talking about the chain of infection in a way that makes it relevant to you. So we're going to get into that now. All right. So understanding infection control is one of the most important jobs that a CNA has. Anybody that works in medicine has to be aware of infection control. Now, the problem here, and it is a problem, is that in clinical settings, we deal with sick patients. Now, I can't just call up my local hospital and say, hey, I'd like a vacation, I'd like to reserve a room. It doesn't work like that. I have to prove that I'm sick enough to get one of their beds. And to do that, I've either got to go to the doctor who admits me or through the ER whose job it is to not admit me. I've got to really prove that I am sick enough to have one of those beds. So that means that everybody in this setting is super sick. In fact, it's the sickest people in our community, right? We put them in a place. If they were healthy, they'd be home. So we know that hospitals and rehabs and nursing homes and other health centers have a higher than average proportion of pathogens, because every single one of those patients brought their pathogens with them. Now, this is where it kind of gets a little bit tricky because CNAs hear this and they think, oh my gosh, pathogens, dangerous place. And I've got to be able to keep myself safe. And that's kind of where we focus our infection control conversations, is how to keep ourselves safe. And yes, that is important. Super important. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Super, super important, because if you get infected, you're going to affect other people. So we want you to be safe, but it's not just about you. And this is kind of the part of the chain of infection that most people don't stop and think about. Now, I have a whole lesson on this in my online in my classroom program. So day 2, if you don't know, I actually live stream my classroom program. And on day 2, class 2, so Wednesday, June 14th, I'm actually going to do it's about an hour and a half presentation on this, and I make it really relevant. Now, we don't have an hour and a half together here today, so I'm going to really shorten this down for you. But I want you to know that there is more content available if you want to watch us on a week from this coming Wednesday. So not quite 2 weeks away. All right. So we know that healthcare workers know there's pathogens. You know there's pathogens. I know there's pathogens. Everybody knows there's pathogens. And we tend to focus our infection control measures at preventing ourselves from getting infected. And what a lot of healthcare workers do is they try to minimize their risk by developing bad practices. Now, one of the worst practices is wearing gloves all the time for everything. And this is unfortunately how a lot of people address this fear of pathogens in a healthcare setting. So fear actually kind of makes us blind. We aren't really thinking things through. We don't really think about all of the parameters. We just start tackling the first thing that we see. So we see a sick patient. We want to protect ourselves. We put gloves on. But that actually doesn't do what you think it's doing, and it puts the patient at risk. And the reason is because when you wear gloves for everything, you stop paying attention to what those gloves are touching, and you end up cross-contaminating all over the place. So I'm not going to get into that on this conversation today. I want to focus on the actual chain of infection and to explain to you why wearing gloves all the time really isn't an effective infection control measure based on the chain of infection. So there's a game in healthcare, and the name of the game is Stop the Pathogen, right? Excuse me. In healthcare, we know that there's patients. We know those patients have pathogens, and those pathogens are trying desperately to find new hosts, right? They want to spread. They need a new place to live because the one that they're in is kind of full of pathogens. So it's looking for new ground. So the pathogens, now, by the way, when I say pathogen, I'm talking about viruses and bacteria and fungi and all the bad guys, right? The things that make us sick. So those pathogens are trying to find new places to live. So when a pathogen is successful and gets out of its current host and gets into another host and becomes, that person becomes a host, and then that pathogen can ramp up production and create a lot of copies of itself and cause another infection. If the pathogen is able to do that, it wins. It just created a whole nother host. It won. So our job is to try to prevent that from happening. Now, there's 6 steps to this game, and we're going to go through all 6 steps. But remember, if the pathogen is able to complete all 6 steps, it wins. Now, if we can stop it, we win. That's really what infection control is all about. It's a game. It's us versus the pathogen. If the pathogen gets 6 steps, they win. If we can stop it anywhere in that process, we win. So we actually have a much better chance of winning because the pathogen has to complete all 6 steps. All we have to do is interrupt 1 to win. So remember that the name of the game is to make sure the pathogen doesn't complete all 6 steps. Okay? So, okay, Jennifer, I'll answer that in just a second. All right, so the first step the pathogen has to complete is existing, right? No pathogen, no problem. So me right now, I don't have any pathogens. I'm feeling pretty healthy. I don't have any pathogens that I know about. So no pathogen, no problem. Now, if I had a pathogen, though, inside me, Then, now remember, the pathogen is playing a game. It's got to complete 6 steps. So just having a pathogen inside a host is step 1. So we go on to step 2. Now that pathogen has to have a place to live. So contrary to popular belief, most, I'm not going to say all, most pathogens must have a certain type of condition in order to live. So the most ideal condition is warm, dark, and moist. So think of the inside of your body. The inside of your body is warm, right? 98.6 degrees, dark because light doesn't shine inside, and moist because you got lots of fluids everywhere. So your body is the ideal environment for pathogens. So if a pathogen is inside you, it's nice and healthy. Now, if I have a pathogen out here on my table, it's not going to survive as long because my table is not warm, it's not dark, there's light, and it's not moist. And now moisture is very, very important. Most pathogens cannot survive without moisture. They have a very, very limited lifespan unless they are in some sort of moisture. So if we can make sure that the environment is nice and dry, that the temperature is controlled, that it's we don't have a lot of hidden areas, right? So we can actually kind of help our environment not be conducive to pathogen proliferation. But inside the body, inside the host, it's also called a reservoir, but inside the host, all of these conditions exist and we can't fix that, right? We can't shine a light inside the body. We can't decrease the body temp because if it goes too low, the patient dies. And we can't do anything about moisture because the body is moisture, right? We're like 70% water. So we really can't do much about this. So once there's a pathogen and they're inside a host, there's not much we can do here, okay? We're going to get to strategies in a minute. But if that pathogen is able to find a doorway out, and the pathogen is looking for a doorway out. Now, it's nice and happy inside the body, but that's only going to last for so long because as this pathogen starts to ramp up production, it's going to get crowded. So it's going to go look for another place to live. At least a few of them are. And if that pathogen is able to find a doorway out, now we're talking. Now we can move on to greener pastures. Now, what is a doorway out? Well, any wet body opening. Remember I said that pathogens need moisture, right? So wet body openings, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your rectal area, your genital area, cuts, rashes, sores, and incisions. Those are all doorways out. So if the patient has an incision, well, the pathogen can get out. If the patient is urinating, the pathogen might be able to get out. If the patient is coughing, that pathogen can get out. So any wet body opening is a doorway out, right? But remember I said that pathogens have to have fluid, right? So this is a mode of transmission. Pathogens don't have legs. They don't have wings. They can't crawl. They can't walk. They can't fly on their own. They can't do any of that. They require something to move them. So this is fluid usually. So pathogens can only do one of two things. They can either float or they can flow. Those are the only two things that a pathogen, that's the only two ways pathogens can move about. They can float on usually droplets, sometimes air currents, but usually droplets that kind of float into the environment when you cough and sneeze and do things like that. Or they can flow like bleeding or urination. So that's kind of a slower movement. So think of those two ways, right? So they can either float or they can flow. Those are the only two choices that a pathogen has because it has to move in liquid. So if a pathogen is floating, it can go further, right? Because it's floating on droplets and air currents. It can go quite a distance. If the pathogen is forced to flow out of the body, well, it's not going to get as far. So the mode of transmission actually matters. as far as how much of the environment can be affected. Make sense? Okay, so the next step here is that pathogens then have to have a doorway in. So let me explain this real quick. Let's say that we have a patient with MRSA in a wound, in a hospital, and you are assigned to care for that patient. Well, MRSA is our pathogen. The patient is the host. The doorway out or portal of exit is the wound. The mode of transmission is the fluid coming out of the wound, right? So if we have a patient with MRSA in the hospital who has a wound and there's wound drainage, now that pathogen is outside of the patient. But remember I said they don't live very well outside of the patient. What they really need is another warm, dark, moist environment to snuggle up in. Well, as long as you have everything intact, right? My skin on my arm. So my skin on my arm is intact, right? So the pathogens, they can't burrow. They can't drill. They can't get past that layer. They have to, just like a wall, right? So this wall behind me, right? Nobody can come through the wall without making a hole first, because the wall is a barrier. It's impenetrable. It's like your skin. Your skin is a barrier. So getting a pathogen on your skin in most cases is not really detrimental because it doesn't burrow. But if that pathogen is able to find a doorway in, like your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your genitals, your rectal area, a wound, a sore, a rash, or an incision, now that pathogen has a way in. So this is important, right? So getting body fluids on you isn't necessarily a panic situation as long as your skin is intact. Does that make sense? Everybody with me? Now, if that pathogen finds a doorway in, now we have a problem. Because you, the inside of you, is warm and dark and moist, and that pathogen's going to make themselves right at home. And then, you're still not infected yet. Hold on. Yes, you have a pathogen in you, but you're not quite infected yet. You have to be susceptible. So what does that mean? Well, I am vaccinated for measles. Okay, I'm up to date on my vaccinations. So if I am taking care of a measles patient and they cough and that pathogen is able to float on air currents and I breathe that pathogen in and the pathogen is now inside of me, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be infected because I have to be susceptible. Now, because I am fully vaccinated against measles, I am not susceptible to infection. And all that means, the vaccination, all that means is that my immune system took a class, was taught how to kill this intruder before it ever has a chance to multiply. That's all a vaccination is. It's a class that your immune system takes to teach them how to kill the intruder before they cause damage. That's really what a vaccination is. But there's a little bit more to this as well. I have to be in good physical health. I have to make sure that I'm well rested, my nutrition is good, my hydration is good, that I'm not overly tired, you know, I'm not pushing myself too hard. I've got to be in good shape because any of those things can actually reduce your resistance. It affects your immune system, and your immune system has to be in tip-top shape in order to identify the threat and kill it. So I have to do what I can to not be a susceptible host. Does that make sense to you? Okay. But if I am, let's say that I wasn't vaccinated for measles and I'm caring for a measles patient and they cough, the measles are floating on the air currents, I breathe in, I breathe those pathogens inside me, I'm susceptible. So now that pathogen is able to multiply and cause an infection, and now I am the reservoir. And if I have a doorway out like coughing, then the pathogens can float on air currents and somebody else can breathe them in, and if they're susceptible, now we've spread again. So this is called the chain of infection. So all 6 of these things have to be present for an infection to establish in a new host. So the pathogens have to work hard, right? They have to be present, they have to be living somewhere, they have to have a doorway out, they've got to have a way of getting around, they got to find a new doorway in, and that person has to be susceptible. If all of those conditions are met, a new infection is formed. Now, as healthcare workers, we have 6 areas that we can interrupt this whole process. So it's a whole lot more work for the pathogens than it is for us. But we have to understand this in order to be effective, right? So as CNAs, we can't really do much about the first 2 steps. We can't get rid of the pathogen, right? That's not really our job. Now, medicine can help with that, but CNAs, there's not much we can do there. We can't even do anything about the host, right, where the pathogen is living. Medicine can give the patient antibiotics and antifungals and antivirals and, all of those things, but there's not much that CNAs can do about those 2. So the first 2, kind of out of our hands. Once we have a patient with a pathogen, now on step 3 is where we can kind of get involved, okay? So step 3, if you remember, was a doorway out. So if our patients are coughing or sneezing or urinating or having bowel movements or bleeding or whatever, any doorway out of that patient should somehow be attended to. So this is why we usually put dressings on wounds, because it helps keep that wound drainage or that blood from flowing, right? If the patient is coughing, then we want the patient to cover their nose and mouth with their arm, not their hand, their arm, to try to block transmission. So there's some things that we can do with doorway out, but it's very limited, very limited. The area that we actually can affect most is the mode of transmission. And this is where we tend to mess up the most, though. Okay, so remember, we've got a patient with a pathogen and a doorway out, so pathogens are roaming free on air currents or flowing in fluids. Now we can wear gloves to try to provide another barrier between those fluids and our skin. Remember, as long as your skin is intact, you're okay. But another barrier is always a good idea, right? Because your hands go up to your face all the time without your permission, all the time. So having a set of gloves on does help remind us that, hey, fluids, so we want to have an extra layer of protection here. So this is kind of where we go wrong, though. Because if we walk in a room and we just put on gloves and we start touching a bunch of stuff, then we are actually transferring those pathogens from surface to surface. And I've seen healthcare workers do this all the time. They'll walk in the room, they'll put on a set of gloves, they'll close the privacy curtain, they'll empty the urinary drainage bag, they'll go dump it in the, in the toilet, they'll clean the container, they'll pour the patient a cup of water and hand it to them, they'll open the curtain up, and then they'll remove their gloves. And think about all those things that those gloves have touched in that room. And all we're doing is spreading those pathogens to other surfaces. Now, if you remember, I said that pathogens don't like to live on surfaces outside the body, but they can survive for a time. So we want to try to limit the amount of spread of those pathogens in the environment, right? But this is the one area that we can be actively involved as CNAs, is with this mode of transmission. But we also want to think about our face, right? Because we have portals of entry on our face. We have eyes, nose, mouth. So if we're going to do things that splash, so like emptying the urinary drainage bag and then pouring that into the toilet, when you're pouring urine into a toilet, you can get some splashback. So you want to protect all the doorways of your face to make sure that you don't get any pathogens in those areas. So you don't want anything splashing into your eyes, breathing in your nose, or you don't want anything in your mouth. It's just gross, right? Pretty high on my gross meter. So when you're going to be working with splashing fluids, you would want to protect those areas of the face. Maybe a mask with a shield would be a good idea, goggles, something like that. So you have to think about the tasks that you're doing in relation to your portals of entry, and how can we make sure that we're not allowing pathogens that may be present to get into any of our doorways, right? You also want to make sure that all of your wounds are covered, that if you've got a scratch on your hand, that you've got a bandage on it, or you're making sure that you glove up even for routine tasks, right? Because you've got a doorway in, and if there's any pathogens on the environment, you don't want them to be able to get inside of you, right? And then the last thing that we can do is try to make sure that we are not susceptible. So we want to do those things I talked about earlier. We want to make sure that we are well rested, that we are maintaining our hydration and our nutrition, and that we're up to date on our vaccines, and we're taking just overall good care of ourselves so our immune system can work properly. And if we do somehow get exposed to a pathogen, our immune system has a fighting chance, and then we don't become the host that can then spread it on to others. So remember, the big thing to take out of this, right, is that there's 6 steps to the chain of infection. The pathogen has to get through all 6 to spread. We, as caregivers, just have to interrupt it somewhere on that path. And we can do that using gloves, making sure that our holes are covered, making sure that if we're going to touch anything that came out of somebody else's holes, we're not spreading it in the environment, and making sure that we are in the best physical shape that we can be in to try to limit our susceptibility. I hope that helps you guys understand the chain of infection a little bit better. I know that this is one that some of my students really struggle with. So if that helped you, because you will have questions on the state exam on this. So I hope that helped you. If it did, can you give me a thumbs up down below on YouTube? And that way other people know that this was helpful for you. So let's see what your questions are. So Jennifer asks, so does bacteria like dark and wet or warm and dry? I always get confused on this. Yeah, Jennifer, it's warm, dark, and moist. And all 3 of those have to be in play. Okay, now, before somebody yells at me, there are some pathogens that are called extremophiles, which means that they're able to survive outside of those general conditions. Now, these are very rare pathogens. We don't see them a whole lot. They're not very common. 99.9% of our pathogens like warm, moist, and dark. That's what they need to survive. There are some that can survive in cold. There are some that can survive in extreme hot. There are some that can survive in dry conditions, but they're very, very rare. Most pathogens need moisture to survive. If everything in the environment is dry, it tends to limit bacterial growth. So let's think about a patient for a second, laying in bed, who is incontinent, right? So the urine just flows out. They have no control over it. So the sheets are probably a little bit moist, right? You probably have a pad underneath the patient to help with that moisture, but those pads are waterproof, so they're plastic lined, which is going to hold in body heat. So you're going to end up with warm. They're under the sheets, so it's dark. The urine makes it moist, and you probably have some pathogens in the area as well. So this is why urinary tract infections are so prevalent when you have incontinent patients, because the environment is just ripe for pathogen proliferation. But it also means that we have to take special care when we're cleaning those patients not to spread those pathogens all over the environment as well, because we do know that they are going to be there. I hope that helps. Yes, Blue, MRSA is a pain. I will absolutely agree with you there. And MRSA's, I probably shouldn't have used MRSA because it's a little bit harder to kill. But just for our general principles, it'll work. Hi, NS. Blue says, there's a reason gloves, gowns, and hand washing is a big deal. The doctors I work with told me many hospitals have no ties policy because they can pick up germs and the germs hitch a ride on said tie. To find new hosts to have fun with. Yeah, Blue, and I would agree with that. But, okay, so I'm going to date myself here. And this is going to be a topic for another conversation. I'm going to talk about scrubs at some point. I'm kind of working up to it. But it used to be a bazillion years ago when you went to work at a hospital, you wore in your outside clothes. Like I would go in dressed like this. And when I got there, there were locker rooms and I would actually change into my work uniform right there in the facility. And then I would go to work. And at the end of my shift, I would get off, go back to the locker room, shower, and change back into my day clothes, my, civilian clothes. And this was specifically to help with pathogen transfer outside of the hospital setting. Now, we got away from that. And I honestly don't really know why. But when you're talking about ties, yes, ties can be a fomite, but no more so than the scrubs that we wear. So I'm not real sure why there's a no tie, specifically tie policy. That just sounds like an infection control specialist that said, hey, this sounds like a good idea. But it actually goes way beyond that. In fact, that's what lab coats are for, right? A lab coat goes on over your outside civilian clothing, but it should be buttoned up. And I've never seen a doctor that actually wears their lab coat buttoned up over their clothing, but it's supposed to be a barrier between their outside clothing and what they come into contact with in a clinical setting. So it's interesting. But yeah, I don't know how effective that no tie policy actually is, right? And yeah, a lot of facilities limit jewelry for the same reasons. And sure, absolutely. Brittany says, I go June 15th to take my CNA exam. Prayers, please. Oh, Brittany, great vibes out to you. We're going to push good vibes out to you. You're going to do fantastic. Come back and let us know how you do so we can send you a congratulations on an upcoming episode. And just go to any of my videos, drop a fresh comment on any one of my videos. Let me know that you passed and we'll congratulate you on an upcoming episode. Hi, Helen. Thanks for joining. Jennifer says, so bacteria likes moisture? Yes. In fact, bacteria needs moisture. It doesn't just like it, it needs it. So yes, bacteria needs moisture. Helen said, if we have not made a mistake, we were supposed to have our game show yesterday, or am I the one that... Oh, okay, Helen, the game show is the first and third Tuesday of every month. So the next one will be this coming Tuesday. So this, I think it's I don't know what the date is. Hold on, let me pull up my calendar here. This Tuesday is the 6th. So June 6th, we will have the game show. Now, that schedule, because we're still really, really new on the game show, that schedule may change in the future. I'm not real sure because I was noticing I was running into a lot of holidays with that schedule. But for right now, it's the first and third Tuesday of every month at 11. So I'm sorry that, Helen, I'm sorry that we weren't there for you. But tune in Tuesday. Helen says, I love this topic because it's very important. Oh, great. Thank you. Hi, guys. Hi, Denise. Hi, Adoncia. Hi, Andrea. Helen says, not easy to understand. Thanks for your way of explaining. I just have to study it. Yeah, and that's really all it is. But go back and we're going to have the replay of this. You can go back and rewatch it as well. Hi, Lisbeth. Let's see here. Brittany, been watching all my videos. Oh, thank you, Brittany. Now, I know that you have your test coming up, but remember that we have our live classroom live stream, and you can go back and watch replays on that as well on our YouTube channel. Let's see here. Mona says, hi, I will start my CNA class June 26th. I don't know where to start with your videos. Oh, Mona, I'm not sure how to say that. Go to our YouTube channel, and actually, let me put this in here for you. This is my website that I just put in that has all the skills videos, but you can also go to our YouTube channel and look for the playlist. It says live classroom live streams, and watch those. That will get you, it's just like sitting in my classroom, just like it. And then you'll also need the ebook. The ebook will help you for the written exam, and that ebook is very, very effective. I highly recommend it. Let's see here. Tim says, what are the best ways to ask other CNAs to assist you in moving or changing a patient who needs a little more attention? Oh, Tim, this is such a big topic. I wish I could tell you that everybody was in this for the right reason. And I wish that we still had that team dynamic that we used to have years ago. But it doesn't really seem like nursing is a team sport anymore. So this is becoming a problem out there, and I recognize that it's a problem. But a lot of times if you go to somebody and say, hey, listen, I need help moving this patient, or I need help doing this task, can you help me? And then what do you need help with so I can help you? Make sure that you're phrasing it in a way that they understand that you're willing to help them with their difficult tasks as well, so they don't see it as one more thing I have to do. They see it as, oh, you're going to help me. So it becomes a little bit more of a partnership rather than I need help. So if you phrase it that way, you tend to get a whole lot more assistance, I guess, less resistance. So that's how I would phrase it. But you can also go to the nurse and ask as well, and just let them know, hey, I can't move this patient, or this patient's a Hoyer lift. Policy and procedure says I need two staff members to do this. I can't go against policy and procedure. So, you can go to the nurse. Like I said, I really, really, really wish I could tell you that everybody is on board with, teamwork, but it doesn't always work out that way. I'm so sorry. Let's see here. Tim says, also, will your videos help with the Utah exams? Yes, it will. Go watch our videos and download the ebook. It will help you. And May says, hi, Miss Patty. Hi, everyone. Hi, May. Ben. Tim says, yeah, for sure. I don't want someone to get hurt. Yes, absolutely. And do you guys know why? I did a lesson on this a couple months ago, but while we're on the subject of Hoyers, do you know why it requires 2 staff members? One of them has to watch the machine, the dials and the joystick and the controls, right? Well, the other person, the second person, is there not to watch that, but to watch the patient. Because if I've got, like I've got my Stream Deck here, right? So, have you guys ever seen one of these? This is really cool. I've got my Stream Deck here, and this allows me to hit buttons and change. See how I hit a button and it changes the screen. So if I'm looking down here and I'm pressing buttons and doing all kinds of things, then I'm not looking at the patient who is in a sling hovering above the bed. And if something goes horribly wrong, if the strap breaks, and they do, or the chain was not hooked in correctly and it's pinching the patient, which does happen, or it wasn't connected to the hook very well, the patient is in danger of falling or getting injured or something horrific happening. And remember, they're hovering above whatever surface you've got them over. Could be the bed, could be the floor, could be the chair, but they're hovering in midair. And how apprehensive do you think they are if nobody's looking at them, right? So that's why we need 2 people for Hoyers, 1 person for the controls, but the second one is really there to watch the patient and make sure that there's no injuries. Adeline says, hi, Miss Patty. How are you doing? Hi, everyone. Hi, I am fantastic on this Thursday. I cannot believe it's June 1st. Where has the year gone? It was just like 2 weeks ago that I was telling you guys Happy New Year. So I don't know where this year has gone. It's just flying by. But I am doing fantastic. I hope you guys are too. All right, so let's get to my favorite topic. Congratulations to those that are new to healthcare. So if anybody else has any further questions, drop them in the chat. This is your last call. And right now, I want to congratulate Ann Pierre Valson. I can't even read that. Sorry, hold on one second. My eyes are getting bad, guys. Yeah, Ann Pierre Valson. Pixel Bunny, oh, what a cute name, and Veteran CB. Congratulations to all of you. These are people that stopped by our channel and let us know that they passed the state exam. And we would like to congratulate you too and welcome you into the wonderful world of healthcare. So if you're testing soon, go to our YouTube channel, put a comment on any one of my videos. Just make sure it's a fresh comment because those are the ones I see. I don't always see the replies. Let us know that you passed and would be happy to send you a shout out as well. So to these 3 individuals that passed the state exam, congratulations to you. Great job and welcome to the wonderful world of healthcare. Now I also have one more that I want to send out, and I don't have a name for this one. So that's why it's not on the list, but I want to, if hopefully they're listening. We had somebody contact us through email and had a question about the state exam. They had gotten our ebook and had watched our videos. We're getting ready to test in New York, and she was writing on behalf of her son. She was helping her son study, and she was very, very impressed with the course and said that it was very helpful, and he was really struggling with some concepts, and the way I explained it just made it super easy for them. And he went and tested and he passed, and we just want to send out a great congratulations to the young man in New York whose mom reached out to me. I don't have your name, so I can't congratulate you by name, but congratulations on passing the test as well. So that's going to wrap it up for today, guys. I know this 45 minutes goes super fast, doesn't it? Or is that just me? It seems like it flies by. I hope you'll join me again next week, next Thursday at 3 for another lesson and another question and answer session. Tuesday, we've got the game show coming up, so make sure you tune in for that as well. And we start classes again on June 12th, so a week from Monday. Tune in for that as well. We cover a lot of really good information, and I take questions from YouTube in my class as well. So if you're joining us via YouTube, feel free to ask your questions there. Yeah, Tim, too fast. I know. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for this week, but I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Go do something fun. Remember, it's not all about work. We have to take care of ourselves too, and that keeps your immunity up and breaks that chain of infection. So go do something fun. Miss Patty said so. All right, guys, until next week, happy caregiving.